Welcome to the Voice of Women. Tonight, we're sharing the haunting story of Sarah, a 50-year-old woman from Oregon whose life took a turn so dark it could have come straight out of a thriller. It's a story about love, loss, and the moment she discovered a truth that changed everything. Stay with us, because what happened next will leave you speechless.
It's strange, isn't it? How the most profound shifts in your life often begin with something utterly mundane. For me, it was a Monday morning. Rain, naturally. It always rains in Oregon, or so it feels. Robert was supposed to be making coffee. I remember the smell, already a comforting prelude to the day, mingling with the scent of damp earth from outside. I was still half asleep, nestled in our bed, the warmth of the duvet a shield against the chill. I heard him moving about, the familiar clink of ceramic mugs, the gentle rumble of the espresso machine. Or rather, I expected to hear it. But then, nothing. A silence that wasn't quite right. Not the soft hum of a peaceful morning, but an absence. A sudden, jarring void where familiar sounds should have been. I frowned, pulling the duvet tighter, blaming my sleep-addled brain. Maybe he was just in the bathroom, or maybe he'd gone out to get the paper, though he rarely did that himself anymore. I waited, listening, but the house remained eerily still. Finally, a faint unease began to prickle at the edges of my sleepy contentment. I pushed myself up, throwing off the covers. The bedroom was cold. Robert's side of the bed was already cool to the touch, indicating he'd been up for a while, not just a few minutes. I slipped on my robe, my bare feet meeting the cold hardwood floor, sending a shiver through me that had nothing to do with the temperature. I padded into the kitchen. Empty. The coffee maker was off, cold, no scent of brewing coffee. His favorite mug, the chipped one with the lighthouse, was on the counter, but it was dry, untouched. My unease sharpened into something colder, a small, tight knot in my stomach. Robert? I called out, my voice a little tentative, a little too loud in the sudden quiet of the house. No answer. I checked the bathroom. Empty. His toothbrush was gone. His razor. Small things, insignificant on their own, but together they began to form a pattern I couldn't quite grasp, a mosaic of absence. I walked through the house, each step echoing slightly, each room silent, expectant. The study, usually a mess of papers and books, was neat. Too neat. His briefcase, which always sat by the door, was gone. His car keys, usually on the hook by the entryway, were gone. I looked out the window. His car, the old, reliable Volvo he cherished, was not in the driveway. The space was starkly empty, a gaping hole. Panic, cold and sharp, began to claw at my throat. This wasn't right. This wasn't Robert. He was meticulous, predictable. He never just left without a word. Never. I checked my phone. No messages. No missed calls. I called his cell. It went straight to voicemail. Hi, you've reached Robert. Leave a message. His voice, familiar, cheerful, mocked me from the digital ether. I left a shaky message, trying to sound calm, trying to sound normal. Robert, where are you? Everything okay? Call me when you get this. I called his office. His assistant, Brenda, answered, her voice chipper. Sarah? Good morning? Robert's not in yet? Is everything all right? My heart pounded. He didn't come home last night, Brenda. He was here, but he's gone this morning. I can't reach him. Brenda's cheerful tone faltered. Oh, well, that's odd. He didn't mention anything about a trip or anything. I'll let you know if I hear from him. The hours that followed were a blur of frantic phone calls. Our friends, his colleagues, distant relatives. No one had seen him. No one had heard from him. It was as if he had simply dissolved into the morning mist. The police were called. A missing person report filed. The questions were clinical, impersonal. Any arguments? Any financial trouble? Any mental health issues? Did he take anything with him? I could only shake my head, tears blurring my vision. No, None of it. He was normal. We were normal. The words felt hollow even as I said them. How could anything be normal when the man you'd shared your life with for 25 years had simply vanished? The police searched the house, politely, methodically. They looked for signs of forced entry, for a struggle, for a note. There was nothing. Just the quiet, orderly home of a couple, one of whom was now conspicuously absent. It wasn't a crime scene, it was a mystery. The days bled into weeks. Each sunrise was a fresh wave of despair. Each sunset brought the crushing weight of another day without him, another day of unanswered questions. Sleep offered no escape. My dreams were a tangled mess of his face, his voice, his absence.
I lost weight, the stress eating away at my appetite. My friends, bless their hearts, brought casseroles, sat with me in silence, offered endless cups of tea. But their pity felt like another layer of my growing isolation. They didn't know what to say, and neither did I. Every time the phone rang, my heart leapt into my throat, only to sink with disappointment. It was never him. It was the police, offering nothing new.
Or a well-meaning friend, asking, "Any news?" The question was a stab to the gut every time. No news. Just silence. I started walking the neighborhood, aimlessly at first, then with purpose. Showing his photo to shopkeepers, to strangers. "Have you seen this man? Robert. He's about 50, graying hair, usually wears glasses." Most people offered polite shakes of their heads, averted eyes. A few offered condolences, mistaking my search for a vigil. The missing person posters I'd put up began to weather, the edges curling, the colors fading under the persistent Oregon rain. Like my hope. It was slowly, inexorably eroding. I would drive past his favorite diner, hoping to catch a glimpse, a miracle. I haunted the places we used to go. The park where we walked Michael when he was little. The bookstore where Robert liked to browse. Each place was a painful reminder, a hollow echo. The police eventually scaled back their efforts. Without any leads, without any evidence of foul play, a missing adult was a cold case. They suggested that perhaps he had simply left, started a new life. The words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken accusation. That he had chosen to abandon me. I fiercely rejected the notion. Not Robert. He was steady, reliable, a good man. He wouldn't do that to me, to us, to Michael's memory. But a tiny, insidious seed of doubt began to sprout in the barren landscape of my grief. What if he had? What if the man I thought I knew was just a facade? I pushed the thought away, fiercely, defensively. It was too painful, too utterly devastating to contemplate. I clung to the belief that something terrible had happened to him, that he was hurt, or lost, or worse. Anything, but that he had simply walked away. Months stretched into nearly a year. The initial frantic search gave way to a dull, constant ache. The house, once filled with the comfortable sounds of a shared life, now felt enormous, silent, permeated by his absence. Every creak of the floorboards, every rustle of the wind outside, seemed to mock me with its emptiness. I started to pack away some of his things, not because I'd given up hope entirely, but because the sight of his untouched razor on the bathroom sink, his worn armchair in the living room, felt like a constant open wound. It was a self-preservation measure, an attempt to staunch the bleeding. It was during one of these bittersweet, emotionally draining, decluttering sessions that I found it. I was in his study, a room I rarely entered, sifting through a stack of old tax documents, trying to make sense of our finances, something Robert had always handled. He had an old, heavy oak desk, a family heirloom from his grandfather. I ran my hand along the familiar worn wood, a wave of nostalgia washing over me. I remembered him sitting there, poring over figures, sometimes with Michael perched on his knee, pretending to help. My fingers brushed against a loose panel on the side, near the bottom. It shifted slightly. Curious, I pressed it, and with a soft click, a small, shallow compartment sprang open. I stared at it, bewildered. I had lived in this house for 25 years, shared this desk with him for nearly as long. I never knew this existed. Inside, nestled amongst a few old coins and a tarnished silver locket I didn't recognize, was a small, worn, leather-bound journal. And a photograph. My heart began to pound a frantic rhythm against my ribs. A premonition, cold and sharp, pierced through me. I picked up the photograph first. It showed Robert, younger, perhaps 10 or 15 years ago, smiling broadly. Beside him, a woman I had never seen before, her arm linked through his, her head resting gently on his shoulder. She was beautiful, with kind eyes and a warmth that radiated even from the glossy print. And then, the children. 2 of them. A boy, perhaps 12, with Robert's eyes, and a younger girl, maybe 8, with the woman's bright smile. They looked happy. A family. My breath hitched in my throat. My blood ran cold, turning to ice in my veins. This had to be an old family photo. A relative, perhaps, a distant memory from before us. But the kids looked too young, too contemporary for that to make sense. And the woman, she was too intimate, too loving in her pose. My stomach twisted, a sickening lurch. Then I opened the journal. It wasn't a diary, not exactly. More like a meticulously kept log. Dates, events, snippets of conversations. It started around 15 years ago. 15 years. That's how long it had been going on. He had another life. A complete, parallel existence. Another wife. Another family. My Robert. Our Robert. This man, the father of my son, the man I'd shared my bed with, my dreams, my whole damn life, had been living a lie for 15 years. The words blurred before my eyes, but the meaning was brutally clear. Dinner with Maria and the kids. Michael's soccer game. Not my Michael, but their Michael. Anniversary trip with Isabella. Isabella. That was her name. Not Maria. He had 2 kids named Michael. Oh God. The layers of deceit were staggering. The journal documented birthdays, holidays, school events, family vacations. All the milestones of a family life, lived with someone else. I don't remember much of the next few hours. Just a blur of white-hot rage, so intense it made me physically tremble, and an icy despair that settled deep in my bones. It wasn't the kind of grief that comes from loss, but from annihilation. It felt like my entire past, our shared history, had been retroactively poisoned. Every anniversary, every holiday, every I love you he'd ever whispered to me felt like a cruel, twisted joke. He hadn't disappeared. He'd just gone home. To them. He hadn't been lost. He had simply returned to his other, preferred life. The journal provided enough breadcrumbs. A town name about 3 hours' drive south of us. A casual mention of the kids' school play at Willow Creek Elementary. A street name, Maple Drive. With shaking hands that felt alien and clumsy, I typed it all into Google Maps. And there it was. A house. A pretty, unassuming house with a small, well-tended garden and a swing set in the backyard. Just like ours. My heart hammered against my ribs, a trapped bird desperate to escape the cage of my chest. It was real, all of it. I didn't sleep that night. I just sat in the living room, the journal and the photograph clutched in my hands, the rain outside mirroring the deluge of tears that wouldn't come. I felt hollowed out, gutted. My life, as I knew it, was a lie, a carefully constructed illusion that had now shattered into a million irreparable pieces. The next day, I drove there. The 3-hour drive felt like an eternity, each mile a further descent into a nightmare. My mind was a whirlwind of emotions, fury, disbelief, a profound, aching sorrow. What did I expect to find? A confrontation? A scream? Some kind of dramatic, cinematic showdown. What I found was far more mundane, and in its ordinariness, far more devastating. I parked a block away, my car idling, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles were white. And then I saw him, Robert, walking out of that house, laughing, holding hands with the woman from the photo, Isabella. He was helping a teenage boy, presumably the one from the picture, with his backpack, adjusting a strap, a gesture so familiar, so domestic. And then he waved goodbye to a younger girl, skipping down the driveway, her bright laughter carried on the wind. He looked happy, relaxed, the way he used to look with me, before everything, before the lies. He looked like a man without a care in the world, living his perfectly constructed, false life. The man I had grieved for, agonized over, had simply been living his other life, completely untroubled by my anguish. I sat in my car, hidden from view, watching. The rain started again, a soft Oregon drizzle, mirroring the tears that finally, silently, streamed down my face. Not a torrent, not a sob, just an endless, quiet flow, a slow leak from a broken vessel. I didn't approach him. I couldn't. The sight of him, so utterly normal in his deception, so completely immersed in his other family, paralyzed me. I just watched, a ghost in my own life story, an unseen observer of the life that should have been mine. It was a tableau of domestic bliss, built on a foundation of cruel, meticulous lies. I drove home. The journey back was a blur of highway and rain, my mind reeling. The betrayal was so immense, so cold-blooded, it defied comprehension. I called my best friend Sarah, but the words wouldn't come out right. All I could manage was a choked sob. She rushed over, found me huddled on the couch, the journal and photos spread out before me. I pointed, unable to speak, and she slowly pieced together the horrifying truth from my fragmented whispers. Her face, usually so open and kind, contorted with shock and fury. The police were initially sympathetic, but then bewildered, then increasingly frustrated. They couldn't arrest him for having a second family. Not exactly. Bigamy is a crime. Yes, but proving intent, proving he hadn't divorced me in secret, he hadn't, was complicated. And he hadn't stolen anything from me, legally speaking. He had just left. They suggested I hire a private investigator, a lawyer. My world had imploded, and the justice system offered me paperwork. Paperwork. That's what it had come down to. The dismantling of 25 years of shared life, reduced to legal documents and court dates. The thought was sickening. I did hire a lawyer and a private investigator. The truth unfurled itself slowly, painfully, like watching a slow-motion car crash. He had met her, Isabella, at a conference, a work trip, 15 years ago. She was younger, vibrant, working in a different city. He had charmed her, woven a narrative of being a single man, unlucky in love, a devoted father to a son who lived far away, my Michael, twisted into a lie. He had lied about his marital status, weaving a fantasy life where I simply didn't exist. He had 2 sets of everything, clothes, toiletries, even hobbies. He would invent elaborate business trips to come back to me or fishing weekends to go to them. 2 distinct lives, meticulously maintained for a decade and a half. The sheer audacity, the meticulous planning, the mental gymnastics required to keep track of such an elaborate charade, it was mind-boggling. He was a master manipulator, a chameleon, changing his skin to fit whatever life he was living at that moment. The worst part, the truly agonizing part, was not just the betrayal of our marriage, the sacred vows broken, but the betrayal of our shared grief. You see, Robert and I had a son, our beautiful, bright-eyed boy, Michael. He drowned when he was 19. A stupid, tragic accident while swimming with friends in a river on a hot summer's day. Gone, just like that. One moment, full of life and dreams, the next, a gaping hole in our world. That loss, it fractured me. It shattered me into a million pieces. I thought it fractured us too, in a way that only shared, profound grief can. We held on to each other. 2 broken people trying to make sense of a world without our son. We cried together, visited his grave together, talked about his dreams, his quirks, his infectious laugh. Or so I thought. All that time, through all that raw, soul-crushing grief, he was going home to another woman, another set of children, leaving me alone in a house that felt too quiet, too empty, too full of ghosts. He was mourning Michael with me, shedding tears, offering comfort, playing the role of the devastated father, the grieving husband. And then, he was going to play father to others, to their Michael, laughing, celebrating birthdays, living a full, vibrant life. It was a cruelty beyond anything I could have imagined. It was as if he'd taken my grief, the most sacred and vulnerable part of my soul, and twisted it into another weapon against me. The depth of that betrayal, that desecration of our son's memory, was almost too much to bear. It felt like he had not only cheated on me, but had also cheated on Michael, on the very essence of our family. Once I had all the concrete evidence gathered by the private investigator, bank records, phone logs, travel itineraries that contradicted his alibis, I had my lawyer serve him with divorce papers. He finally had to face me. Not in some dramatic showdown, not in a tearful confession, but in a cold, sterile lawyer's office. He looked worn, older. The veneer of his double life was cracking under the weight of exposure. He tried to apologize, mumbled something about not wanting to hurt me, about falling out of love, about being trapped. Lies. All lies. His eyes held no genuine remorse, only a desperate plea for me to make this disappear quietly. He wanted to preserve his new life, his comfortable deception, as much as possible. He wanted to avoid the scandal, the ruin of his carefully constructed world. But the scandal was coming, whether he liked it or not. The divorce proceedings were contentious, messy, drawn out. His other family found out, of course. Imagine their shock, their devastation. Isabella's world, too, had shattered. Her children's father was a bigamist, a liar. I truly felt for her, the other woman, in a strange, detached way. She was a victim of his lies, too, just a different kind. Her trust had been violated, her life built on a foundation of sand. The exposure, the public humiliation, the utter destruction of his two lives began to take a toll on him. He started drinking heavily, his usual composed demeanor replaced by a haggard, desperate look. And it was during this period, after the truth was out and his two lives had violently collided, that things took an even darker turn. I started receiving strange phone calls. Hang-ups at first, then hushed, threatening whispers, sometimes just heavy breathing on the line. My tires were slashed in my driveway one morning. Small, unsettling incidents that, individually, I could dismiss as random acts of vandalism or even my own paranoia, heightened by stress. But cumulatively, they began to weave a tapestry of fear around me. Then an anonymous letter arrived. Typed, no return address, just a single, stark sentence. You won't get a penny. Disappear. It was chilling in its simplicity, in its implied threat. I showed it to my lawyer, and he advised me to be cautious, perhaps even install security cameras to notify the police. I was already a bundle of nerves, and this just ratcheted up the fear. I felt exposed, vulnerable, as if I were being watched, stalked. And then Robert started to call me more often. Not about the divorce proceedings, not about the messy legal battles. He claimed he was worried about me. He knew I was struggling financially, that the legal fees were mounting, that the stress was eating away at me.
He offered to help. He started coming over, ostensibly to discuss settlements, but also to bring me groceries, fix a leaky pipe, the very one he'd complained about for years, now suddenly a priority, or just check in. He acted contrite, almost gentle.
He talked about our past, about Michael. He would reminisce about our son, about funny anecdotes, about happy memories. And for a fleeting moment, a tiny, desperate part of me almost believed he felt something. Some shred of remorse, some flicker of the man I once loved. It was a cruel manipulation, preying on my vulnerabilities, on my lingering grief for Michael, on my desire for some kind of closure, some understanding. He even suggested we go on a trip, just us. A healing retreat, he called it, to clear our heads away from the lawyers and the drama, away from the prying eyes of the community. He said he felt terrible about everything, that he wanted to try and find some peace, some way for us to move forward, even if separately. He knew I loved the Oregon coast, especially in the off-season, when it's wild and windswept, when the raw power of the ocean feels both humbling and strangely comforting. He booked a cabin, isolated right on the cliffs overlooking the vast, churning expanse of the Pacific Ocean. The larger, more cynical part, however, was wary, deeply suspicious. What was he truly up to? Why this sudden concern? This sudden desire for reconciliation, even a false one? The anonymous threats, the strange incidents, they all swirled in my mind, forming a mosaic of unease. But something compelled me to go. Perhaps it was a desperate longing for some kind of confrontation, some final reckoning, or perhaps a morbid curiosity to see how far his deception would stretch. We drove down in my car, his car having been impounded by the police as part of the ongoing investigation into the threats. The journey was tense, punctuated by forced pleasantries and long silences. The cabin was beautiful, rustic, nestled precariously on the edge of the cliffs, with breathtaking, panoramic views of the stormy ocean. The wind howled around it, a relentless, mournful cry, and the waves crashed dramatically on the rocks below, sending spray high into the air. It felt isolated, terribly isolated. Too isolated for a healing retreat. That evening, he was overly attentive. He made dinner, a surprisingly elaborate meal for him, and poured wine, insisting I drink. He kept refilling my glass, telling me to relax, to let go of the stress. He talked about our early years, the joy we shared, the plans we made. He played the part of the repentant husband perfectly, but his insistence on the wine felt off. I wasn't usually a heavy drinker, and his constant pressing felt unnatural, unsettling. A cold knot tightened in my stomach. I feigned tiredness, pleading a headache from the long drive and the relentless wind. I excused myself to bed early, leaving him to finish the wine, or so I thought. I lay in bed, fully clothed, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I listened to the storm outside, the relentless roar of the ocean, the wind rattling the windows, and I listened to Robert, moving around in the living room. Something was wrong. My gut screamed it. This wasn't the same man, even the manipulative one. This was a performance, more sinister, more calculating. I remembered the anonymous letter, the slashed tires, the strange phone calls. The sudden concern felt like a wolf in sheep's clothing. I waited until the house fell quiet, until I heard him settle into the living room, a soft groan followed by what sounded like the creak of the old armchair. Slowly, carefully, I slipped out of bed. My bare feet made no sound on the wooden floor. I crept to the bedroom door, easing it open a crack. He was on his phone, his back to me, speaking in hushed, urgent tones. The storm outside was so loud it almost drowned out his voice, but I caught fragments, chilling fragments that pierced through the roar of the wind and waves. Sleep now. Yeah, the will accident, of course. Cliffs, no one will suspect. My heart stopped. My blood ran cold, turning to liquid ice in my veins. Accident. Cliffs. No one will suspect. The words echoed in my mind, each one a hammer blow. My mind flashed back to Michael, to the river, to the devastating finality of a sudden, unexpected death. Robert knew. He knew how I felt about accidents, about drowning, about losing someone suddenly, irrevocably. He was using my greatest trauma, my deepest fear, against me. He was planning to make my death look like a tragic accident. I crept back to the bedroom, my body shaking uncontrollably, a tremor that started deep inside and vibrated through every muscle. I knew, with chilling certainty, what he was planning. He was going to kill me. Push me off these very cliffs, into the raging ocean below, and make it look like I had stumbled, heartbroken and drunk, a suicide, or a tragic accident in the storm. And the no one will suspect part, that's what hit me hardest. He thought he was clever. He thought he could get away with it. And the will, he mentioned, he wanted everything. Everything we had built together, the house, the savings, my share of our meager inheritance, for her. For his new family, for Isabella and their children. He wanted to erase me completely and profit from it. I had to act. But how? He was bigger than me, stronger, and he was clearly a cold-blooded monster, capable of unspeakable cruelty. I felt a surge of adrenaline, sharpening my senses, pushing away the terror, replacing it with a primal need to survive. I had to survive this. For Michael, whose memory he had desecrated. For myself, for the life he was trying to steal. I pretended to be asleep again. I heard him come in later, his footsteps soft, deliberate. He stood by the bed for a moment, and I held my breath, feigning deep, even breathing, praying he wouldn't detect my terror. I felt his presence, a chilling shadow over me, and then he left. I heard him go back into the living room, heard the soft click of a lighter, the faint scent of his pipe tobacco. I waited. I waited until I heard the rhythmic, guttural sound of his snoring, a familiar grating sound that once comforted me, a sign of his presence, his life. Now it just filled me with dread, a macabre lullaby. I slowly, carefully, got out of bed. My legs felt like jelly, but I forced myself to move. I needed a weapon. Something. Anything. My eyes fell on a heavy old-fashioned brass lamp on the bedside table. It was solid, weighty, with a thick base. My heart hammered, a frantic drum in my chest. This was it. Fight or die. The choice was stark, terrifyingly clear. I crept into the living room. He was sprawled on the couch, dead asleep, the pipe still clutched loosely in one hand, a half-empty wine glass on the table beside him. He looked peaceful, innocent, like the man I married, the man who used to read to me by the fire. The monster was hidden beneath the familiar facade, lurking just beneath the surface. I raised the lamp. My hands were shaking so much I almost dropped it. This wasn't me. I wasn't a killer. I couldn't be. But if I didn't, if I hesitated, he would kill me. He would extinguish me, just like he had extinguished our son's memory, our shared history, our future. I didn't strike him. I couldn't. My hand froze, suspended in the air. The years of shared life, even the poisoned ones, held me back. The memories, good and bad, flashed through my mind, a chaotic kaleidoscope. I was terrified, but I wasn't him. I wouldn't become him. I wouldn't let him turn me into a killer, even to save my own life. But I still had to get out. I had to get away. I gently lowered the lamp, placing it back on the table. My eyes darted around the room, searching for an escape. My car keys. They were on the small table by the front door, right where I'd left them. Silently, painstakingly, I made my way to the door. My heart was in my throat. Every creak of the floorboards, every gust of wind, felt like a betrayal. I fumbled with the latch, the cold metal biting into my trembling fingers. It clicked open, and the wind shrieked, threatening to tear the door from my grasp. I slipped out into the raging storm, the rain lashing my face, chilling me to the bone, the wind nearly knocking me off my feet. I struggled with the lock, got it secured with a desperate click, and then I ran. Ran as fast as my trembling legs would carry me to my car. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely get the key into the ignition. It took several attempts, each one an agonizing moment of fumbling despair. The engine roared to life, a blessed sound. I reversed, gravel spraying, turning the car around as fast as I dared on the narrow, winding cliff road. I didn't look back. I just drove. Through the rain, the oppressive darkness, the overwhelming terror. My mind was screaming, my body numb, but I drove. Away from him. Away from that cabin. Away from death. I drove all night, the image of his sleeping face. The whispered words, the cliffs, burned into my mind. I didn't stop until I reached a gas station far from the coast, in a brightly lit, populated area. The fluorescent lights of the convenience store felt like a beacon of safety. My phone was dead, of course. I found a payphone, a relic, and called the police. My voice was hoarse, incoherent, a raw, ragged sound of terror and exhaustion. I was sobbing, shaking so violently I could barely hold the receiver. But I told them everything. The journal, The second family, the anonymous threats, the phone call I overheard, the chilling plan to stage my death as an accident on the cliffs. They listened, with a mixture of skepticism, then growing disbelief, and finally, grim curiosity. They sent officers back to the cabin. They found him there, asleep on the couch, the half-empty wine glass beside him. They found the open door, the clues I had left behind in my desperate flight. And they found his phone. What finally sealed his fate, what tore through his carefully constructed lies, wasn't just my testimony or the incriminating journal. It was the text messages on his phone, a chilling exchange between him and Isabella, his mistress. She had been the one pushing him. She wanted the property, the money, the life they believed they were owed. She explicitly told him, in stark, undeniable words, to finish her off and make it look like an accident. She even suggested the cliffs as the perfect spot. Her greed, her cold calculation, her utter disregard for my life was as shocking as his willingness to comply. They were in it together. The next few months were a blur of police interviews, court dates, lawyers, and the kind of public scrutiny that makes you want to crawl into a hole and never come out. My story, his deception, the attempted murder, it was sensational. The headlines were brutal. His other family was shattered, publicly humiliated. Isabella was arrested too, for conspiracy to commit murder, but she made a deal, testifying against him in exchange for a lighter sentence. A common enough tactic, but it stung. In the end, Robert was sentenced to 9 years in prison for attempted murder. 9 years. It felt both too short for the monstrous betrayal and the terror he inflicted, and, paradoxically, a lifetime away from the man I once knew. I didn't attend the sentencing. I couldn't bear to see him, to hear his lies, or his hollow attempts at remorse. I just wanted it to be over. I wanted him to be gone from my life, truly gone this time. It's been a few years since all that. The divorce is final. The house is mine. His name has been expunged from my life, from the deeds, from our shared history, as much as legally possible. Enough to keep the house, enough to breathe, enough to feel a fragile sense of security. I still live here in Oregon, in the same house. It's quiet now. Too quiet sometimes. The echoes of Michael's laughter and even Robert's old complaints sometimes still float through the rooms, but they're fainter now, less painful. They are becoming echoes, not open wounds. I spend a lot of time in my garden, tending to the rhododendrons, watching the seasons change, the rain fall, the sun break through. There's a calming rhythm to it, a sense of growth and renewal. I've reconnected with old friends, women who stood by me through the darkest days, and I've made a few new ones. I volunteer at the local animal shelter, finding solace in the unconditional love of abandoned creatures. I take long walks on the beach, not the one near that cabin, but a quieter, gentler stretch of coastline, where the waves whisper secrets instead of threats. I watch the waves, listen to the gulls, feel the vastness of the ocean. It reminds me of how small I am, and yet how resilient. The betrayal, the fear, the sheer gut-wrenching pain, it's still there, deep down. It's a scar, a permanent mark, a part of who I am now. It reminds me of what I endured, what I survived. But it doesn't define me. I survived. I fought for my life, literally, and I won. Justice was served in its own imperfect way, and that brings a quiet sense of closure. I am healing. Slowly, day by day, breath by agonizing breath, then by quiet, peaceful breath. I'm learning to trust myself again, to rebuild my world, not around a man, not around the shattered remnants of a past that was a lie, but around my own strength, my own resilience, my own truth. I am Sarah, and this is my story. It's not a happy ending, not in the fairy tale sense. There are no princes, no gleaming castles. But it's an ending where I am free, where I am alive. And that, after everything, is enough. More than enough. It is my victory.
Thank you for watching.
If you enjoyed the video, share it with your friends, subscribe to the channel, and stay tuned for new stories. Take care of yourself.